Okay, guys, so welcome. Today we'd like to talk about the part of the circle. So first of all, let's define what a circle is. A circle, we say, is a set of points in a plane which are at equal distance from a fixed point O. So it means that this circle you see here, they are small, tiny point that we have joined, and they are of equal distance from a fixed point. So this is the fixed point. That is the O. That is the fixed point we are talking about. They are of equal distance. So wherever our ruler line from here to here is of the same distance. From here to here is of the same distance. And we know that line, which is called the radius. We know that line is called the radius. When I rule any line from here, touch here, it's called the radius. It's called the radius. So to talk about some parts, we have the circumference, we have the arc, we have the segment, we have the chord, we have the diameter, we have the sector. So we are going to talk about each of them one after the other. So the first one we talk about is the circumference. When we talk about the circumference is just the total distance. The total distance around this. So the total distance around this circle, we call it the circumference. That is the circumference we are talking about. That is the circumference we are talking about. The total distance. That is the circumference we are talking about. The next thing we talk about is the arc. The arc. The arc, we say, is a part of the circumference. So if I take any part, so we know this is the whole circumference. So if I take any part, say this part and this part, I call it the arc. I call it the arc. It's any part. If you take any part of the circumference, we call it arc. We call it arc. The next thing we'll talk about is the segment. When we talk of segment, a segment is a circular region bounded by an arc and the chord of the circle. So we talk of a segment, it's an arc and then a chord. An arc and a chord. So if I do this, and add this, I call it a segment. I call it a segment. I call it what? A segment. I call it a segment. If I do this, it is bounded by what? An arc and then a chord. Sorry, this one is not part. This one is not part. So we call it a segment. The whole of this side, we call it a segment. The whole of this side, we call it a segment. This one is not part. The whole of this side, we call it a segment. We call it a segment. The next one I'll talk about is a chord. Very important. Between a chord and then the diameter, most students they mistake diameter for a chord. They mistake diameter for a chord. When we talk about a chord is a line that has both ends on the circumference. A chord, so it's a line which passes through, so it has both ends. So if I rule a line, it touch here, we call it a chord. From here to here, we call it a chord. From here to here, we call it a chord. That is a chord. All that you see, we call it a chord, these lines. But the reason why most of them make mistake, they usually call the chord a diameter, because the difference between them is that a diameter is also a chord. But with diameter is a type of chord which passes through the center. So we realize that all the lines I ruled, none of them were passing through the center. So when that line or that chord passes through the center, is no more called a chord, but rather a diameter. But some also call it a chord. But the actual is diameter. Diameter. When that line passes through, when that chord passes through the center, we call it diameter. We call it what? Diameter. And the last one I'll talk about is a sector. A sector. So we say a sector is a part of a circle which is bounded by an arc and then two radius. A sector is what? A part of the circle which is bounded. So I was drawing using sector, sorry. So when we talk of a sector, this is a sector. This is how a sector looks like. It is bounded by an arc, and I said an arc is any part of the circle and then by two radii. So if you draw this, I've drawn a sector. This is my two radii and this is the arc. And I already explained arc. Part of the circle is called an arc. So this is called a sector. We call this a sector. So when it comes to sector, we have the minor and then the major. So this one, you see how small it is. So it's called the minor sector, and the whole of this side is called the major sector. So this is the part of circle I want you to know. The next time we meet, we will dive into circle theory. Yes, before you can understand circle theory, you must know the part of the circle you have. So thank you for watching. Follow me for more, comment for more. Thank you.